Hi everybody, welcome to the lesson overview for 3.3 Energy and Ecosystems. This is our second learning target underneath the biosphere. This is a supplemental video in which we're going to talk about food chains, food webs, and energy pyramids, or ecological pyramids. The first question we want to answer is, how does energy flow through ecosystems? And really, first of all, energy is going to flow through an ecosystem in a one-way stream. It's going to go from the producers onto various types of consumers. These food chains are a series of steps in which organisms transfer energy by eating and then being eaten. And these food chains can vary in length. So an example from the Everglades would be starting with our primary producer down here, algae, and those are going to be eaten by the flagfish, and so on and so forth up the food chain until we get to the alligator. Notice that the energy is starting from the algae, which is photosynthetic in most cases, and flowing towards the alligator. All right. Notice that we also do not include the original energy source, either the sun or chemical energy, in our food chain. And that's because at that point, those things are not, they cannot be used as energy by living things. It has to be first transformed into a usable source of energy, which is done either photosynthetically or chemosynthetically. Food chains are then going to be put together, and this is what we're working on in class, is we're going to put the food chains together. And if you look down here, we have our algae and our flagfish and our largemouth bass, and so energy would flow from the algae this way to the flagfish, to the largemouth bass, to the anahinga, and then over to the alligator. And so there are several things that are happening here. We have several food chains. The algae might also be eaten by the shrimp and the worms, which then might be eaten by the crayfish, which are then eaten by the killfish or the largemouth bass. And so we can go several different ways here. But notice that we always start with algae, something that's photosynthetic, like algae or plants, and we'll move in that way. So basically, a food web is a combination of several food chains. Now, we also have in our food chain, or our food web, we have bacteria and fungus and detritus, and these things are going to break down living matter that is now dead, and so that it can release things back into the soil to be used by the plants or by the algae. And so basically a way to think of that is we've got this house over here that once was living and now has died, and the decomposers are going to take that and break it up into new pieces so that the primary producers, such as plants and algae, can reuse those nutrients to form things that they need. Those nutrients then will be passed along the food chain as well. If there's a disturbance in the food web, it could have a very dramatic effect on everything else that is in that habitat. So, for example, if all the animals in this food web depend directly or indirectly on shrimp-like animals called krill, which are down here, we have the krill. If everything else in this food web depends on them, and we kill off the krill, that is going to affect the rest of our food web. Algae will overgrow, and there will be nothing there to eat it, and all of these other things will eventually die or learn to eat something completely different. They might even move out of the habitat and compete with other animals in a different habitat for similar food. So next we want to talk about trophic levels in ecological pyramids, and there's three types of ecological pyramids that we can illustrate. The first is a pyramid of energy, and that's going to show the relative amounts of energy available at each trophic level. Remember that a trophic level is how much food there is, or a place on our pyramid that shows how much food or energy there are. And each time we move up, it's a new trophic level. We'll get to that in a second. Next, we have the pyramid of biomass, which illustrates the amount of living organic matter at each trophic level. And then we can have a pyramid of numbers, which shows the relative number of individual organisms. So let's take a look at these a little bit more carefully. In each step of the food chain or food web, it's called a trophic level. So down here we have a ecological pyramid, and down here we have our primary producers. That is a single trophic level, and there may be several different types of plants that live down here in this primary producer area. The next level is our first level consumer, or we've been calling it the primary consumer. That is another trophic level, and there might be several different types of consumers, several different small animals, rodents. If we're talking about a pond or a lake or whatever, this could be several different types of very small fish. The next trophic level would then be our second level consumer, or our secondary consumer. And then what we talked a lot about today was our third level consumer, also known as tertiary. I'll make sure I spell that out for everybody. Tertiary consumer. And we learned today that tertiary meant third level. As we move up to each new level, each new trophic level, we are going to lose about 90% of the energy that was at the previous level. And that's because most of the energy that we have on this trophic level right here is going to be used by those organisms. And as they use that energy, a lot of it will be transferred and given off as heat energy. So as we move up each level, we have the 10% rule. It's known as the 10% rule, that the consumer is only going to get 10% of the energy from the previous level. So pyramids of energy, we have that 10% rule, with 10% of the energy available within one trophic level is going to be transferred to the next trophic level. The more levels that exist, the less energy that there are for those consumers. And that's why that our pyramids are only going to be so tall. We can only have so many levels, otherwise once we get up, and some will have a fourth level consumer up here, but we won't get into a fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth level consumer because there's not enough energy. There's only 0.1% energy left from our original 100% that we had down with our primary producers. Pyramids of biomass are going to take into account the total amount of living tissue within a trophic level. So we're going to take all of the plants that are in that habitat or within that ecosystem. We're going to calculate how much mass they have together, and that's going to be the biomass for that trophic level. And that is determined in part by the amount of biomass a given trophic level can support is determined by the amount of energy available to it. So if we take away some of this energy right here, some of these organisms, if we take that away, that's less energy that is available to the next trophic level. So we might get rid of some of these as well. The pyramid of numbers then shows the relative number of individuals. So we would literally count the number of individuals that are in each trophic level. And this gives us a good idea in terms of numbers, but of each organism. But we will use all three pyramids when we're talking about ecology. That's the end of this supplemental video. I hope that helps you. Don't forget to take a look at Chapter 3.3 in your textbooks to get some ideas for the quiz, as well as studying all the supplemental stuff we've done in class. Hope this helps you, and we will talk to you soon.